So it's the earliest I've ever been speaking to people. I came over from Vienna yesterday, and it's 4:30 in the morning for me right now. And I could fall asleep, I think it was 3:30 at night, because it was my bedtime. So I'm pretty tired, but I had 2 Red Bulls almost, so I think I can probably go ahead. Я не говорим по-русски, я учим по-русски, я говорим сербски, я серб из Белграда. But I will stick to English, I think, because it's probably easier for all of us to talk together. So I came all the way from Vienna because of this community here and because of the power that you have. It goes all the way that CodeFest is known for this, way beyond the borders. I'm not a developer, so I'm probably the least smart person in this whole room. The last time I wrote code was in a language called Turbo Pascal. Anybody wrote ever in Turbo Pascal? Whoa, yes! I thought I was old, man. So, okay, not that old. But I have a very specific view at GitHub at the world. I joined GitHub 2 years ago, and there were a couple of real wow factors to me personally after 10 years in IT and all of those things that I saw. So I thought I'll tell you about those views. I'll tell you about the big contrasts that are in how people write software and how they write code. And I will try to draw the analysis from what I've seen. So this is no textbook knowledge. I didn't read books for this. This is just speaking to people and to customers, what I saw worked and what didn't work. So I hope you will find it interesting. So first of all, the one unique view, and that I have, and that probably many of you have as well, is the view from GitHub's world to the global community. So we see how people write code on GitHub in the open source world. How does the open source tick today? Which is extremely impressive. So this is, for instance, some of the statistics that we have. And Russia is one of the fastest growing developer communities in open source and contributors that we have worldwide. It's an incredible, I mean, just in 12 months, 74% more people just registering and contributing to open source. That's really impressive, and this is a big thanks and a big applause to all of you. Really, thank you. So the second view that I see is when speaking to hundreds of companies. Now, don't look at the logos here. I just put up some logos from big companies. I think they all in one way or the other use GitHub, but it's the specific peak when I'm speaking to large corporations and when we are helping them transform from an old way and how they used to write software historically to the new way, and how, you know, to a modern software development environment. And this picture that you see behind the walls of the company sometimes is impressive, and sometimes, or very often, unfortunately, is shocking when you compare it to the previous version of open source and how the community ticks and writes. And the final and huge impression that was for me when I joined GitHub was actually how GitHub as a company itself works, because it was something completely different that I have ever experienced before in other corporations. So combining those differences, the outcome and the fact is that there is a huge difference of how you write code at home and how you write code at work. So who of you here has a job or writes in the industry or lives from writing code? Makes money by writing, or a designer or an engineer or an ops person. So all of you, and who of you is actually contributing personally and privately as well and having their fun projects in software? So most of you here, right? So how can you actually bring a bit of this revolution? And I was really trying hard to find a positive revolution picture. If you look for revolution, it's normally with dead people and blood and all of this, but this is like the best one. But how to bring the revolution to your work and to change it. So here's the example. If you want to write software by yourself, you analyze the problem, you work on the problem, and you test the solution, and you're done. If you want to work on this at your work and with your team, well, you start the same thing, then you write the stories, then you get to assign those, then you need to ask people questions, then you wait for the business to reply, then you discuss it again, then you rewrite it again, then, well, everyone starts working on random stuff, and then you schedule meetings, and then you reschedule, and then Kevin is gone, and then I can't even keep up with this, but this just keeps going and going and going, and ultimately you end up, I think, buying a bar and going bankrupt and getting divorced. But it's a bit of a unrealistic view, but it ends up going on for quite a while. So how are we going to get rid of this, right? Yeah. Do you want to keep going? Well, that's at the end of it. It's not really the solution. But I will give you a real-life example of the differences that I see at companies. So last night before the presentation, I ran a report on the production of GitHub.com. And I basically ran a report how many deployments we had in production on our system. And the outcome here was we had 1,200 versions of GitHub.com in the past 7 working days. Now, that's continuous delivery, right? Many companies that I end up speaking to, well, they maybe deploy sometimes twice per year, sometimes once per month if they're good. Car manufacturers deploy, well, once every 5 years when you have a new model. And how do you get this, onto the next level? How do you change that? So here's some facts. First of all, this is a simple Google Trends analysis comparing classical version control systems such as Team Foundation Server, Subversion, GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab. And you can see clearly that around 2013, the whole social coding platform idea really took off, especially in the open source world. So most of you, who of you is using Subversion privately at home? 1, 2, 3, right? And it's not a large number, and it's nothing against you. You can use whatever you want, but actually most of the people have moved on from just version control to social coding. You would be impressed how many companies are actually still on this yellow line of Subversion back at work. So people are using the old systems still at work while they have moved on privately a long time ago. So what does it mean, social coding? Well, social coding is combining the code, the version, the context to the code, why is the code the way it is, with your own developer persona. Developer persona is basically like your developer CV. What did you write? Where did you contribute? What are your projects? And so on. So here's another interesting fact. If you look at the worldwide top 100 websites, there are 2 that are not made for, well, end-user mass consumption. All of the top 100 sites are, newspapers, social media, search engines, buying things, but there is only 2 pages which are exclusively not for the broad masses, and this is Stack Overflow and GitHub, which means how big is the global developer community if you actually can make it into the top 100 websites on GitHub? We have 45 million unique visitors every month. How many people are actually writing code? How relevant is it? We're seeing people people from industries that would never write code before, when it comes to genetic research, when it comes to engineering, data science, who are using coding techniques and technologies to move on in their side. We're seeing lawyers using their legal framework as code, versioning it, discussing it, treating it just like code. So based on this, developers rule the world, right? I mean, it's a lot of them, and you know, there's a lot of power that they bring, but ultimately they don't seem to be able to, well, rule their own workplace. So what are the gaps? What is it that, you know, I came across directly at businesses that actually shows the biggest differences? What do companies do wrong? So at work, normally you have the so-called invisible engineers. I've been at businesses who have thousands of developers working for them. They don't know really who their developers are, what they're working on. Maybe you just wrote the best piece of code ever, and you know, in 2 years nobody will know it, nobody will contact you, nobody will speak with you about it, and you will not be able to show it or getting anything out of this. So why would you even try hard? I was actually specifically challenged by a company which had more than 1,000 software engineers, and they said, well, how do we find our best 5 Swift developers? We want to start an iOS application. Well, the boss decides he wants an iOS app. He asks some project manager or some manager, who are the best developers for Swift? Well, maybe it's the guys who are the loudest in the meeting. Maybe the guys who are the best are actually the ones who are not the loudest in the meeting. So how do you figure this out? And companies are completely neglecting this. At home though, and in the open source world, you build up your own persona. So you have your own dashboard, you can follow people. People can follow you. You can have your passion projects. Developers are used to social media, as we are all. So you have your Kontakte or Facebook. You don't have LinkedIn. But you have Twitter and Google and Yandex and all of these things where you're being active on a daily basis, but as soon as you go to work, you just disappear. You're gone from the social environment. So why shouldn't you be able to open up your own profile at work where your colleagues can see what you're working on? Where maybe you had a project 2 years ago that you still remember well and somebody can ask you a question about it, or even give you the next promotion. The tool set within the companies actually defines the attractiveness of how you work and how much you learn even at work. Are you stuck in a cubicle writing down the code in a standard way, or do you actually learn from somebody? Can you follow, maybe you have one of the best Java developers working at your company in the office in another city, and you will never be able to benefit from it if you can't actually follow them and see what they're doing. So how do you keep your talent? If you've invested 3 years of your life into a company and nobody knows what you did, well, you can leave. But if everybody can see what you've done and you know what you've done, they want to keep you, and you probably want to stay because you've built up a huge track record of success that is visible to everybody. So the next thing that I would like to cover is making decisions. How do you decide about your code? Do you decide it? Who decides? How do you have a discussion about it at work? Now, I spent good 8 years in a huge corporation, and there is one, big and most used system to make decisions. And maybe you have seen it before, and I want to hear your reaction if you've ever been there before.
Business practices that refuse to die. Number 44, email trees. Let's keep this simple. You need to make a decision, but need the input from 4 team members. So you draft an email and send it to the team. Person number 1 replies to all. So does person number 2. But 3 and 4 only reply back to you. In addition, unbeknownst to you, person number 4 emails person number 5, who thinks they should have a say in the decision as well. Person number 5 replies to everyone. You gather all the feedback and send a synopsis back out to everyone. You also receive emails from persons number 1 and 2 asking why number 5 was included in on the discussion. You reply back to them that, although not ideal, it'll be okay. Person number 5 also forwarded the email to person number 6, who at this time also replied to all, but didn't get the last email. So, to include her, you forward her the last email and CC everyone else just to let them know that person number 6 was in on the discussion now too. You now email everyone with a final decision and want their buy-in. Person number 6 asks for one small change. You agree, make the change, and email everyone again for an agreement. Everyone emails you that they agree. By the end of this madness, 61 emails have been sent to make one decision.
Have you ever been there? Yes. And then, how are you going to find this decision in 6 months? I guarantee you, the email is the best way to lose any information or decision forever after a couple of weeks in the avalanche of thousands of those, and which one is the actual real decision that has been made. So that's how I saw decisions being made, and that didn't work very well. Now, when I joined GitHub 2 years ago, I came, very enthusiastically to San Francisco office and got my laptop, and the first thing that they told me is, we don't use emails at GitHub. And I went, what? Like, really? My goddess of everything? My it tells me in the morning what to do and whom to talk to, and it's really the most important task list for me. And I was shocked. But then actually I realized it's one of the best things that happens to me. Like, I still have an email, by the way, so you can email me, but it's mainly for external communication. Internally, we actually treat everything as code. So there is different coding languages, including English or Russian. It's also code, and it can be versioned and changed and tracked, and there could be a good reason why it is the way it is. So it's not just that developers actually code, and this is applicable to all the companies, but actually everybody needs and can contribute to code. So let's say a domain expert, if you're in a tractor manufacturing company and you're a developer there, you as a developer possibly don't have the best information as maybe a field engineer does who is speaking with the actual users. So how do you make this connection? This connection normally today is broken. There is no communication from the field about the code or with the code and the direct connection. So what we're seeing in many companies is that actually the coding expands, and that more and more things are being treated as code, and that more people are joining in to actually, well, maybe not contribute, but actually provide feedback about functionalities and other similar things. Laws are codes. It's in German, but basically you have this for many countries. I couldn't find it for Russia. You have a version of a law, then you open a pull request. It's a discussion in the parliament, and ultimately you merge it back into master. That's when it becomes law again. But there is a good reason why the discussion takes place. I wish parliaments would be so well documented, like code is sometimes, and legal things and discussions. But you can basically apply this flow to anything. I would give you a very concrete example. This is used by New Relic, also by GitHub, and I will talk you through a non-code pull request that you can do. So let's say you're having a travel policy, and the travel policy lets you travel only in second class or economy class. Now, you would love to travel in business class because it's hard to sit for 4 hours in a plane in economy. So you create a feature branch of your travel policy in your human resources department's repository. In this branch, you add a couple of commits, which basically is the change of the line where it says if your flight is more than 4 hours, you can go for a business class upgrade. You open a pull request, which means you actually invite your legal department, you invite your finance department, you invite everybody else to come in and to comment, and then you have a discussion around it. And the human resource department says, that's a great idea, we want to do the best things for our employees. The finance department says, well, it's too expensive, but let's move it to 4 hours. Maybe you find a consensus in the end. Well, maybe if you're doing code, you probably ship it to a test environment. If you're doing it in a non-code environment, maybe legal checks if it's okay. And ultimately, you merge it back into master. So at this moment, you're having the new policy being there. But what is the benefit of this? In 2 years' time, maybe you're gone or promoted or hit by a bus, it doesn't matter. And somebody else comes in and asks, well, why is the policy the way it is? Why isn't it in a different way? You can go all the way back and see this decision is not lost in an email, but this decision is versioned, it's kept, and everybody knows the context to this decision with the decision. And many companies are adapting this. So if you have time, you can search for a great talk from New Relic and how they've changed their whole engineering philosophy by actually applying coding philosophy to everything at their company. And then there is the famous DevOps discussion, right? And the endless war between the ops people and the developers and the management's idea to force them and to make them best friends somehow. Well, it's true. You know, you come to many existing companies and you're, you know, having the IT as the restrictor. You know, you want a new server, you need 7 weeks ahead of specifications and security, things that you need to test, so they already blocked you even before you started. Then you have the developers or the tester or the designer or whoever, you know, it's like there's walls between the people. What we found extremely effective was not DevOps, but we call it ChatOps. Have you heard of ChatOps, anybody? A few of you? Good. Well, ChatOps is basically the philosophy where you move everything into chat. We at GitHub, we use Hubot. That's, by the way, open source. You can use it yourself. This is a virtual bot which resides in all of the systems, has all the logins. He's in GitHub, he's in Slack, he's in all the tests in the development systems, he's in the diagnostic system. So a developer or an ops person doesn't need to have 25 different logins, but all they need is their text editor, well, GitHub, but GitHub obviously, and you would require your chat client. Everything else is done by Hubot. So I showed you a graph earlier about GitHub deployments, right? I said I ran a report. Well, I'm not a developer and I'm not an ops person. And all it took me was one simple command in Slack to let Hubot go into, I don't even know what system, to go and fetch this information for me and put it right into chat. But what does it actually mean? I mean, this was more of a fun project, but if you're actually having a serious issue and you're doing all the inspection, all the commands in chat, visible for everybody, for the developer, for the ops people, you can A, learn from each other, but B, you know what's going on. So it's not the guru who disappears in the basement and after 4 hours comes back up sweaty and says, I fixed it. And nobody knows ever why, but he did it and you know, it's great. But this way actually you can follow them. GitHub was under one of the biggest DDoS attacks about 2 years ago. The whole defense was in a chat room. It was actually done through Hubot in a chat room. Now, today when developers start or when ops people start or security at GitHub, all they do is just basically go back to the chat that took place back then and you see all the things that have been done. Here's an example of one of the developers asking Hubot where he can deploy, which environment at GitHub is free. Hubot goes and tells him where you can come back and deploy. And this is actually what a commit into GitHub production looks like. It's a single line item in chat that everybody can see and follow, and Hubot just does the rest. So ChatOps actually really combines and is the only and the best way that we've seen work to come closer to DevOps and to have a shared common ground. Automation. You know, there's this famous, you know, I don't test but only in production. It's not necessarily the best way, but let's be true. I mean, testing isn't so easy. It's a hassle. You need to go for this, and it's actually annoying sometimes. Well, you can automate a lot of things. Again, I'm using GitHub as the example because I have most access to this, but we're having between 15 to 25 different tests that run after every single commit a developer does. just to provide him immediate feedback, does it work or doesn't. He doesn't need to log in, or she doesn't need to log in anywhere at all. And then finally, open source. Many companies think that open source is the solution for everything, or is the evil or the root of all evil, I would say. And you know, the question is, where do you go? So what we've seen work is open source is great for commoditized things. So you don't have to rewrite an operating system, a database, a search engine, because it doesn't give you the competitive advantage. You don't need to reinvent the wheel because everybody is using the wheel. It doesn't change anything for you. However, the really critical, mission-critical things for a company is something that you depend on, and companies like to keep it for themselves. On GitHub, you have, I think, about 60 million projects. Those are just open source. This is 20% of the code that is hosted on GitHub. 80% is proprietary still today, which is quite big. Companies, however, still use open source as well for innovation. So if you have a small R&D team, you can open up an open source project and get a much bigger community to bring in. One thing that is also used by modern businesses on open source is open source as a way to hire. So you don't need to be, you know, looking for people without beards to hire them. You can go and look at who is the most active contributor to my open source projects. I know for a fact companies like SAP proactively hiring the most active open source contributors to their projects. So it's a great way to source. So ultimately, and coming to the finalization of the learnings, what I saw is that companies get stuck in a vicious circle. They have terrible old tools very often, which lead to limited possibilities on processes, which again draw walls and division into your culture, which then again stops you to adopt new products or tools to move on. And you're stuck in this, and companies lag behind for 10 years. So how can you actually change things? How do companies successfully move on? And I've seen 3 successful ways to exit this. And as a side note, cheap is not always the best. The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten. So often decisions are made quickly to get things done cheaply, but then you suffer for a long time. But the first thing that works, and that is actually the best, is the change as culture. Unfortunately, I've seen it mainly work as on startups and on small companies, which you know, have the spirit of continuously putting in new things and driving new experiences and trying out new tools and learning from them. This is a cultural thing. Unfortunately, it's very few companies. About 20% of the successful transformations are management-driven. That's great. It's not a lot, but if the management actually does make the decision and sees the strategic value of the developer and keeping them happy, they are much more successful in implementing the things. Unfortunately, not many managers understand that, or many leaders understand that. This is a quote that I got directly from the CEO of the German stock exchange, who basically said that for 20 years they were killing themselves with their own processes instead of actually breaking loose. And from one day to another they scrapped any existing process that they had within the company and just moved to whatever you would like it to be on a completely new tool set. So that was a revolution, but management driven. But here's the real thing, and this is how it normally works. This is basically bringing it back to reality. And it's breaking the vicious circle from within as the developer. And the things that you can actually change and get done is replacing the tools that you're working with, sometimes even illegally. I'm seeing most transitions, even at large corporations, starting with a rusty server secretly hidden under the table of one of the people who basically put up their own things. They get their group of 10 developers on it. They start their new processes with it. They develop a nice culture within this group. They end up delivering better products, surprisingly, at the same time. Other teams here about it. They adopt it as well. And this is how the whole snowball gets rolling from underneath. And you cannot imagine, but it's actually 80% of the companies that I'm encountering is that at some stage somebody kicks off this avalanche, and 1-2 years later, there's this oh shit moment. What is this? We have a production system that is running on a server under the desk. We actually need to do something about it. Guess what? Managers love it, because in 2 years they present it as their own success. You love it because you end up having actually the environment that you love to use and that you like to do. And here's a quote from Mark Twain: "The secret of getting ahead is getting started." So if you keep on waiting for somebody to change it for you, you will wait for a long time. And you need to get something done by yourself. So because the Code Fest is full of amazing things to learn of and speakers that will speak to you, here's just 2 tips or 3 tips for you for the next following days. Learn as much as you can, get inspired, bring this back home, and then go to work on Monday and get started, like now. Don't wait, don't let the managers tell you and take you anywhere. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Marko. Time for questions. Who's ready? You can pick your hand and I'll give you the microphone. Anyone? Really?
Thanks for saving the day with a question.
Thanks for your speech. It was really amazing, really inspiring. What I want to ask is, you've been talking about the product for developers, and it is a very good place for developers to make changes, to invent something. But do you believe that this approach is going to work in developing things that are supposed to be sold to, say, common people? It's the place where developers are not actually the users, are not actually the customers.
Yes, absolutely. So actually, and I'm unfortunately not allowed to speak about the company, but one of the largest car manufacturers, car parts manufacturers, was running on a system that is, well, more than 12, 13 years old because it's legacy. And in car software production, you make a wrong line of code and somebody dies. I mean, that's really the outcome if you break something. And when I was talking about the rusty server under the table, that was actually one of the biggest car manufacturers, because the developers simply had enough. They've seen that the things that they're getting as tasks to finalize and the tools that they have was so frustrating for them, wasting a lot of time. And you know that you're working in an inefficient way every day, that they basically started their own thing. Today, this company has about 3,000 software developers on the modern stack, and they have about, well, 11,000 still to move to the modern stack. But this is how it started. It started with a group of 10 people, and that was 2 years ago.
Yeah, thanks.
Ребята, есть лайфхак. Кто сомневается в своем английском, может задать вопрос по-русски, а мы переведем. Ничего не поменялось. По-английски будешь спрашивать? Давай.
Hello.
Hi.
Hubot, it supports other systems like Bitbucket and others, no, GitLab.
Of course not. No, Hubot is open source. You can adopt it probably to whatever you want. So it's yeah, but don't do it.
One more here.
Of course.
Hello, I'm late on your presentation. Can you please repeat me one important thing?
Should we start from slide number 1?
Yeah, one important thing. Just one thing you think important on your presentation.
Oh, you want me to say the The main thought, okay, bring open source behind your firewall and apply the same methodologies behind your firewall. So inner source. One slide, 20 minutes.
Hi, Marko.
Hi.
Can I ask you, the most interesting part I found for me, it was connected with not the DevOps, with ChatOps. Could you give us just more details? What tools do you use internally in your company to make this process goes better? What chat tools like Slack or something else? What is it better for the job?
So I normally like to do a ChatOps demo. During those conferences, unfortunately, we didn't know if it would work, so we didn't go for it. But it's, I would say, a very specific integration with Qbot, with GitHub and Slack, that actually also runs with Jenkins, a very special version that we use internally, and with all the other, I would say, tools that we use for deployments and so on. Qbot is fun to use, so basically it's a social feature for us. You can ask Qbot anywhere in GitHub, where is Marko, and it will tell you I'm in Novosibirsk. You can ask about the weather, you can ask about funny things, and we love GIFs. Like, you should, if I would show you a GitHub chat, it's like full of crazy memes and GIFs. But the great thing is that actually you do any change that you do, any deployment, any commit even is posted into a chat room where the relevant people are in there. So you actually can follow or be in, or have to be in some of the chat rooms to follow, or you can just sit in them, but you always know what's going on. You know who is in the queue, you know who is making what analysis, and you're doing this real time. And maybe, you know, you have a question and you ask Qbot, maybe somebody else, one of your colleagues sitting in, I don't know, Japan, knows the answer already, and helps you out with this. So it basically, the chat room brings you back to one common place globally, with no restrictions of what you do. I don't know if this answered your question, but...
Thank you, and it really makes sense. Do you think this type of, this have future, this is future for us, for development process, the ChatOps? Do you think it's future and it's a trend?
Well, I have to say yes, because that's what I'm seeing as being extremely successful. At GitHub, for instance, the person responsible for GitHub.com with the 40+ million users every month is the last developer who deployed. So actually, the code that you write as a developer is the code that you yourself deploy into production. There is nobody else to do this for you. And if it's broken, by the way, so, you know, it's your responsibility. So for those, you know, 5-10 minutes or 2 hours or 10 hours that actually you are the last committer to GitHub.com, you're the one responsible as well for the whole thing.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hello. The question, have you ever tried to look over 80% of private repositories to find and hire the best developer for GitHub for you? No,
because we have a very strict privacy policy. So we take this actually very seriously.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
But if I can tell you, the biggest threat to GitHub is security. That's why we're extremely, extremely careful about it. Imagine you have Uber and Lyft hosting their code on GitHub. So the biggest two competitors that you can find. Like, if there is a breach between the two of them, we basically lost our business. So security is the absolute highest degree for us. And by the way, you can install GitHub on your own servers as well, so you don't have to even trust us for this.
You told that you don't use emails, you use Git-like branches to discuss different things, laws, inner policies, and so on and so forth. How long did it took to change traditional form for this new one?
So I think that GitHub is very lucky that we were in this, how should I say, change as culture or culture as code. And because GitHub, I got that. And because GitHub invented the whole flow, it's like, you need to consume your own things. So actually, GitHub never really was a big fan or a big user of email at all from the beginning. So it's probably a bad example.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you for your talk. I have a question about integration and configuration of this bot. How much time it takes from the beginning, if we don't know what it is, till the time when we can really work with it? Because it requires configuration, teaching the team and everything.
I will be honest, I don't know. I'm not technical enough to tell you this. You can check out on Hubot, and if you want, come back to me and I can even connect you to some people at GitHub who can actually help you with this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, everyone, the last question.
We have one there, one
хочу
here,
еще
one
напомнить,
here.
что те, кто не успел задать свой вопрос, прямо сейчас мы пойдем в экспертную зону, и Марко продолжит общаться со всеми, кому интересно. Нет, я отдам микрофон.
Thank you for inspiring talk, by the way. I have a question. Do you have different specialities of your developers, like different areas of responsibility, or all of them are like multi-instrumentalist and can do everything of stuff? And the second part of question, if you are, do you have any kind of like a scheduled duty to be responsive for some part of your infrastructure code base, like some person who is sitting in a chat and can answer the questions about particular system and or subsystem, like something go wrong and to fix it?
Yes. So that's a very good question. So GitHub, up until about 3 years ago, didn't have management, didn't have job descriptions. You were hired and you could start and code whatever you felt like. So it was basically very open sourcey. But then, when the company grew bigger and more relevant, you actually had to do this. So yes, we do have product managers, we have teams which are global now. We even have a couple of layers of management now, which is new for the whole company. And yes, there are definitely certain duties. So when it comes to support, when it comes to operations, when it comes to security, you have people who are responsible about this. Now, I took out a couple of the slides that reveal more of the inner life of GitHub. That was not the point of the speech. But we have people sitting globally, basically around the clock. And yes, there is always somebody in some chat room responsible for it.
The question is, do you have any like a restricted schedule for the duty people, or it's like a random stuff because of somebody sometimes?
I think there is a, on the certain things, GitHub.com being down is quite a significant impact for many people in the world. So there is a strict schedule, for instance, on those people. But you can basically, if something goes wrong, within very short time, you have, I think, the whole company on chat.
And I'm sorry for a little bit longer, but yeah, okay. Let's talk a little bit later.
We can talk later.
Yeah.
It's no problem. And please come find me. I'm more than happy to speak. I'm here for both days, so I'll be out there.
So,